The sky burned orange as the shuttle broke through the thick clouds of Terminus. Inside, 20 people checked their breathing masks and pressure suits one last time. Sergeant Frank Morgan looked out the small window at the landscape below. Sharp, rock formations jutted up from purple-tinted jungles. Strange flying creatures scattered as the shuttle descended. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot announced. Gravity will hit you hard, folks. Remember your training. Frank turned to his security team. Stay alert. Everything on this planet evolved to kill. Weapons hot once we exit. The science team sat across from the Marines. Dr. Olivia Carter reviewed data on her tablet, her face tight with concentration. This was the moment she had worked toward for years, the first human outpost on a Category 5 Deathworld. The shuttle touched down with a heavy thud. As the door opened, the true weight of Terminus hit them. At 1.8 times Earth gravity, even breathing felt like work. Frank stepped out first, rifle ready, scanning the perimeter. The air stank of sulfur, even through his mask. His suit sensors flashed warnings about the toxic atmosphere. Clear the landing zone, he ordered. Establish the perimeter. Jones, Rodriguez, take point. The Marines moved into position while the science team unloaded equipment. Dr. Carter approached. Frank. Her steps labored under the heavy gravity. We need to get the atmospheric shields up before nightfall, she said. The temperature drops over 100 degrees after dark. Frank nodded. My team will secure the area. Get your people working. On the habitat. Over the next 12 hours, they assembled the prefabricated buildings that would serve as their home and laboratory. Energy shields hummed to life, creating a breathable zone within their small compound. Frank watched the jungle beyond the perimeter. Something moved in the shadows, something large. The first attack came at dusk. Private Jones screamed over the comm as a creature with too many legs and glistening black skin pulled him into the undergrowth. By the time Frank and 2 Marines reached the spot, they found only blood and torn equipment. What the hell was that? Private Rodriguez's voice shook. It moved too fast for targeting. Frank called everyone back to the compound and doubled the guards. That night, no one slept as strange sounds echoed from the jungle. Morning revealed claw marks on the outer shields. Something had been testing their defenses. Dr. Carter organized her team to analyze samples while Frank received a message from Command. They're sending more weapons, he told his remaining 5 Marines. Heavy stuff. Command says to hold position. Dr. Carter looked up from her work. These readings are fascinating. The plant life here contains compounds we've never seen before. This could revolutionize medicine if we can study it properly. If we live long enough, Frank said. 3 days later, they lost Private Rodriguez. Something had sprayed acid that ate through his suit. He died screaming as his skin dissolved. The remaining Marines grew quiet, jumpy. Dr. Carter found Frank at the perimeter fence. I'm sorry about your people, she said, but what we're discovering here, it's important. Frank didn't answer. He was watching movement in the trees. Since landing, his team had spotted 6 different predator species, each more dangerous than anything on Earth. But something else was out there, something bigger that stayed hidden. On the 7th day, as they expanded the perimeter to accommodate new equipment, the automated Sioux, the creature that stepped into the clearing, made every human freeze in place. It stood nearly 12 feet tall on 6 thick legs. Its body was covered in natural armor, plates that gleamed like polished obsidian. 4 yellow eyes tracked the human's movements while a mouth full of curved teeth opened in a silent roar. Hold fire, Frank ordered as the Marines raised their weapons. Wait for my signal. The beast tilted its massive head, studying them. Steam rose from holes along its spine. A thick tail with a club-like end swayed behind it. Dr. Carter slowly raised her scanner, her hand shaking. It's unlike anything in our database, she whispered. Look at those front limbs, they're almost like arms. The creature took another step forward. The ground seemed to shake. Private Lee fired without orders, his nerves breaking. Energy pulses hit the beast's chest. Plates and dissipated like raindrops. The creature moved with shocking speed. It leaped across the clearing and smashed through the outer defense barrier. Lee screamed as massive jaws closed around his torso. The beast bit down once and tossed the Marine's body aside like trash. Heavy weapons. Now. Frank shouted. The remaining Marines unleashed everything they had. Most shots bounced off the beast's armor. A few found gaps, drawing thick yellow blood that steamed when it hit the ground. The creature roared, a sound so deep it made the human's bones vibrate. It charged the main building, smashing equipment and tearing through metal walls. Dr. Carter ran for the lab as Frank and his team tried to draw the beast away. Private Miller went down, his leg crushed by the creature's tail. Frank grabbed him and pulled him behind a barrier. "Get to the emergency bunker," he told the injured Marine. The beast turned toward the lab building where the science team had retreated. It sprayed something from glands near its mouth, a yellowish liquid that began to eat through the metal door. Frank grabbed an experimental pulse cannon that had arrived with the last supply drop. The weapon whined as it charged. He aimed at one of the creature's eyes and fired. The blast knocked him backward, but it also hit its mark. The beast screamed in rage and pain as one eye exploded. That got its attention, Frank muttered as the creature turned toward him. Instead of attacking, the beast backed away. It seemed to reassess the situation. Then, with surprising deliberation, it retreated to the jungle. The attack had lasted less than 5 minutes, but the damage was extensive. 1 Marine dead, 3 injured, and half their equipment destroyed. In the command center, Dr. Carter tried to make sense of the scan data she had collected. Frank joined her after seeing to his wounded team. "We're calling it the Ravager," she told him, pointing to a holographic model of the creature. "Look at this, it has redundant organs, an advanced nervous system, and some kind of natural acid production." Frank studied the image. "Can we kill it?" "Maybe, but that's not what interests me." Her eyes lit up with scientific excitement. "Its regenerative abilities are remarkable. See these cells? They repair damage at 20 times the rate of human cells. This could revolutionize medicine." "It killed Lee. It nearly killed all of us." "I know," she said more softly. "I'm sorry, but we need to understand it, not just destroy it." Frank looked at the destruction around them. "Command needs to know what we're dealing with. We need better weapons. Maybe call in specialists." Dr. Carter touched his arm. "I'll make the case. To study it. If we can capture a specimen." "Capture?" Frank shook his head. "You saw what it did to our barriers." Before she could answer, the communications officer called them over. "Message from command. They've reviewed our initial report and scans. They're sending a specialized unit with heavy weapons and containment equipment." Dr. Carter smiled. "See? They understand the value of studying this creature." Frank wasn't convinced. He looked toward the jungle where the Ravager had disappeared. In his 15 years as a Marine, he had never seen anything like it. The way it had studied them before attacking, the way it had retreated after being injured, it was almost like it was thinking. As night fell on Terminus, Frank ordered extra guards on all sides of the compound. In the darkness beyond their lights, something watched and waited. Ensors began to flash. Something massive was moving through the jungle toward them. The ground vibrated slightly with each step. "Everyone inside," Frank ordered, raising his rifle. "Defensive positions." Dr. Carter stood beside him, scanner in hand. "Whatever it is, it's big. Biggest life sign we've recorded yet." The trees at the edge of the cleared area began to shake. Birds and smaller creatures fled in all directions. Frank aimed his weapon at the tree line as a deep, rumbling sound rolled across the compound. "I think," Dr. Carter whispered, "we're about to meet the apex predator." The security team braced as the trees parted and Death stepped into the clearing. The specialized team arrived 3 days later in a combat shuttle. 10 soldiers in advanced armor suits stepped out, carrying weapons Frank had only seen in military catalogs. Their leader was Captain William Hayes, a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes. "Sergeant Morgan," Hayes said, not offering a handshake. "Brief me on this beast." Frank led Hayes and his team to the command center where Dr. Carter had set up a detailed model of the Ravager based on their scans and recordings. "It's smart," Frank warned. "Smarter than any animal I've seen." Hayes smiled slightly. "It's just an animal. We've dealt with plenty of nasty creatures on other worlds." Dr. Carter stepped forward. This isn't like other worlds, Captain. Terminus evolved predators beyond anything we've cataloged. That's why we're here, Doctor. Hayes examined the hologram of the Ravager. We have stun weapons that can take down something 3 times this size. We need it alive, but docile. Frank noticed how Hayes looked at the creature, not with caution, but with anticipation, like a hunter seeing a prized trophy. The hunt began the next morning. Hayes and his team entered the jungle with tracking equipment tuned to the Ravager's unique biological signature. Frank went with them as a guide while Dr. Carter monitored from the base. The jungle of Terminus was dense and dangerous. Plants released toxic spores when touched. Small creatures scurried away from the humans. The heavy gravity made every step exhausting, even in powered armor. Signal is getting stronger, one of Hayes's men reported after 4 hours of tracking. The target is approximately 1 kilometer ahead, moving slowly. Hayes directed his team to spread out in a standard capture formation. Frank stayed close to the captain, not liking how easily the soldiers moved through the jungle. "You've never faced anything like this," Frank said quietly. "We should be more cautious." Hayes gave him a dismissive look. "We're the best hunters in the fleet, Sergeant. This is what we do." They continued deeper into the jungle. The terrain changed, becoming more rocky with deep ravines cutting through the landscape. The tracker led them toward a narrow pass between 2 cliff faces. "Perfect," Hayes said. "We can trap it there. Team 2, circle around to the far side." Frank felt a cold sensation in his stomach. "Captain, this feels wrong. The Ravager has been moving in a straight line for hours, almost like..." A screech from above cut him off. One of Hayes's men shouted a warning just before the Ravager dropped from the cliff overhead. It landed on 2 soldiers, crushing them instantly. The beast had been waiting above them all along. "Open fire," Hayes ordered. Chaos erupted. The Ravager moved with terrifying speed, dodging most shots. The energy weapons that did hit seemed to cause pain, but not serious damage. The beast spat acid that melted through armor. It used its tail like a club, knocking soldiers into the ravine walls. Frank fired his rifle, aiming for the eye he had damaged days earlier. The Ravager seemed to remember him. It turned and charged directly at him. Hayes stepped between them, with a shock lance jamming it into the creature's chest. The Ravager howled and retreated a few steps. For a moment, Frank thought they might win. Then the beast did something unexpected. It threw a dead tree trunk at Hayes. The massive log crushed the captain against the ravine wall. "Fall back," Frank shouted to the remaining soldiers. "Retreat to base." Only 3 of them made it back to the extraction point where their transport waited. As they lifted off, Frank saw the Ravager watching from the jungle edge. It wasn't pursuing them. It had won, and somehow it knew it. At the base, Dr. Carter treated the survivors' injuries. The command center was silent as Frank reported the HFY disaster. 9 dead, including Captain Hayes, he concluded. The Ravager set a trap. It anticipated our tactics. "Command is ordering evacuation," the communications officer announced. "They're sending a ship to pull us out." Dr. Carter looked stricken. But everyone stared at Eric Miller. He was not the type of person who normally spoke up in meetings. Quiet and thin, he spent most of his time maintaining the base's communication equipment. Few people had noticed him until now. "You?" Frank asked. "No offense, Miller, but this thing killed trained soldiers." Eric nodded. "I know. That's why fighting it doesn't work. We need to watch it first." Dr. Carter looked interested. "You mentioned zoology?" "I studied predator behavior for 6 years before joining the fleet," Eric explained. "I specialized in apex predators from extreme environments." Frank shook his head. "Too dangerous. Command wants us out." "Give me 3 weeks," Eric said. "I can build a hidden observation post. No weapons, no confrontation. Just watching and recording. If I find nothing useful, we leave." Dr. Carter turned to Frank. "The evacuation ship won't arrive for a month anyway. We have time." After hours of argument, Frank reluctantly agreed. The next morning, Eric packed light supplies and basic recording equipment. He took no weapons except a small knife. "This is crazy," Frank told him as he prepared to leave. That thing is smarter than we thought. Eric checked his camouflage suit. That's exactly why I need to understand it. Smart predators have patterns, habits, weaknesses. Dr. Carter gave Eric advanced sensors to collect biological data. Be careful, she said. Your observations could save lives on other Deathworlds. Eric left before dawn. He traveled 5 miles through the jungle to an area where the Ravager had been spotted multiple times. There he found a massive old tree with a hollow, spaced 30 feet above ground. It gave him a perfect view of a clearing while keeping him hidden and safe from ground predators. For the first 3 days, Eric saw nothing. He set up his equipment and studied the surrounding area. He noticed things the others had missed. Strange markings on trees, disturbed soil and patterns, areas where no small animals ventured. On the 4th day, the Ravager appeared. Eric remained perfectly still as the massive creature moved through the clearing below. It was marking its territory, spraying scent from glands on its neck onto trees and rocks. Day after day, Eric recorded the Ravager's habits. It hunted in the early morning and late evening. It avoided certain plants that gave off strong odors. Most importantly, it followed specific paths through its territory, paths that formed a perfect pattern once Eric mapped them. In his 2nd week, Eric witnessed something remarkable. The Ravager encountered another predator, a 6-legged cat-like creature the size of a tiger. Instead of immediately attacking, the Ravager displayed dominance behaviors. It raised its spine plates and expanded its chest. The smaller predator retreated, but not before Eric noted how the Ravager protected its throat and belly during the confrontation. On the 18th day, Eric saw the Ravager fight a rival of its own kind. The battle was brutal but followed rules Eric recognized from Earth predators. The Ravager had vulnerable points, joints between its armor plates, the base of its spine, and its throat when extended. When injured in one of these areas, it changed its fighting style to protect that weakness. When his communication device failed on the 20th day, Eric knew he had to return to base. He carefully made his way back, avoiding the Ravager's regular paths. The knowledge he carried could change everything. Frank was shocked when Eric walked into the compound 3 weeks after leaving. "Miller, we thought you were dead." Eric shook his head and handed over his data disks. "I'm very much alive and I know how to deal with the Ravager now." In the command center, Eric displayed his findings. He showed maps of the Ravager's territory, images of its vulnerable points, and videos of its fighting techniques. "It's intelligent, yes," Eric explained, "but it's also predictable. It has routines and weaknesses like any animal. Most importantly, it responds to environmental cues we can manipulate." Dr. Carter studied the data with growing excitement. "This is extraordinary. With this information, we might be able to capture it after all." Frank looked at Eric with new respect. "What's your plan?" "We don't fight it on its terms," Eric said. "We use what I learned to create a trap that uses its own instincts against it." For the first time since landing on Terminus, the team felt hope. They had a chance now, thanks to one quiet man who chose to observe rather than confront. "Barely begun our research. This planet has so much potential." Frank stared at the jungle beyond the barriers. "That thing is too dangerous. We need to leave." "Give me one more chance," Dr. Carter pleaded. "One more approach, not with weapons, but with observation. We need to understand its behavior first." Frank was about to refuse when a quiet voice spoke from the back of the room. "I could do it," said Eric Miller, a communications specialist who had kept to himself since their arrival. "I have a background in zoology. Let me observe it from a distance before we give up." For the next 5 days, the team worked on Eric's plan. They would build a trap using the Ravager's own territory markers and behavior patterns. Dr. Carter designed a special cage that could withstand the creature's strength and acid. Frank organized the remaining security team to set up the trap in a narrow valley Eric had identified as part of the Ravager's regular path. "The key is to make it think another predator has challenged it," Eric explained as they prepared. "These markings need to be exact." He showed them how to create fake territory markers using chemicals that match the Ravager's scent. On the 6th day, as they were finishing the preparations, the weather monitoring system sounded an alarm. A massive storm was approaching from the north. "Everyone back to base," Frank ordered. "We need to secure everything before it hits." They barely made it back before the storm arrived. Winds over 200 miles per hour slammed into the compound. Lightning struck constantly with bolts that split the sky. Rain mixed with acid fell in sheets that melted anything not protected by the base's shields. Inside the main building, the team listened to the storm rage. Then a loud crash shook the entire structure. "The shuttle!" someone shouted. On the monitors, they watched in horror as their only transport ship flipped over, its wings tearing off. Another lightning strike hit the communications array, destroying their link to the fleet. The storm lasted for 18 hours. When it finally passed, they emerged to find devastation. Half their equipment was destroyed. The shuttle was beyond repair. The communication system was a melted pile of metal. Dr. Carter assessed the damage with growing despair. "The backup communications will take weeks to repair. The evacuation ship won't know to look for us if we can't contact them." Frank gathered everyone in the damaged command center. "We have enough supplies for 2 months if we ration carefully. The priority is repairing communications." Eric studied the sensor readings with concern. "We have another problem. The storm changed the landscape. The trap we set is gone, and the Ravager's territory has been disrupted." As if to confirm his words, the perimeter alarms began to sound. The sensors showed multiple predators moving toward the base, including the Ravager. The storm had driven all the creatures in the area into movement, searching for new territory. "It's coming here," Eric said, pointing to the largest signal. "The damaged equipment is giving off heat and electrical discharge. It's attracting predators." Frank ordered everyone to battle stations. The remaining Marines prepared the few heavy weapons they had left. Dr. Carter and her team rushed to protect their research and essential equipment. "We can't fight all of them," Frank said grimly. "Especially not the Ravager. Not in our current state." Eric stared at the sensor display, watching the Ravager's approach. It was moving faster than normal, driven by the disruption of its territory. Behind it, smaller predators followed, taking advantage of the path the Ravager cleared. "There's another way," Eric said quietly. "The Ravager is following our electrical signals. If someone left the base with a portable generator, they could lead it away." Dr. Carter looked alarmed. "That would be suicide." "Not necessarily," Eric replied. "I know its behavior now. I know where it's vulnerable. With the right preparation, I could lead it to the geothermal fields to the south. The natural hazards there would give me an advantage." Frank shook his head. "No way, Miller. That's too dangerous." "Do we have a choice?" Eric asked. "The base won't survive a direct attack, not now. Our defenses are too damaged." The room fell silent as everyone considered their options. The dots on the sensor display moved closer to their position. The Ravager was only 3 miles away now, moving with purpose. Dr. Carter looked at Eric. "You really think you can do this?" "I've spent 3 weeks studying it," Eric said. "I understand it better than anyone else here. I might be the only one who has a chance." Frank stared at the quiet communicatio. Frank stared at Eric for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If you're sure about this, I won't stop you. But you take a weapon, even if you don't plan to use it." Eric shook his head. "The weight would slow me down. I need to move quickly." He began gathering supplies: water, emergency rations, medical, kit, the small portable generator, and his tracking beacon. Dr. Carter pulled Eric aside as he prepared. "This is beyond brave," she said quietly. I don't have words for it." "It's logical," Eric replied with a small smile. "I'm not being heroic. I just understand the Ravager better than anyone else." While Eric prepared, Frank ordered the remaining Marines to set up a distraction on the north side of the base. They would draw the smaller predators away, giving Eric a clear path to intercept the Ravager alone. Dr. Carter handed Eric a small device. "This will record everything you see and your vital signs. Whatever happens, your data will help others understand these creatures." Eric secured the device to his collar and checked his supplies one last time. The tracking beacon would let the base monitor his position. The portable generator was the key. It would emit the electrical signals that would attract the Ravager away from the base. I'll lead it south to the geothermal fields, Eric explained. The unstable ground and hot springs will give me an advantage. Frank looked skeptical. And then what? How do you plan to stop it? One step at a time, Eric said. First, I save the base. The team gathered at the south exit to see Eric off. No one spoke much. They all knew the odds. Even with his knowledge, Eric was still just one human against the most dangerous predator they had ever encountered. Dr. Carter surprised everyone by hugging Eric. Come back alive, she whispered. Eric nodded and stepped through the airlock. The heavy gravity immediately pressed down on him. Without powered armor, every movement took extra effort. He activated the portable generator, which began to hum with electrical energy, and started moving away from the base. On the command center screens, the team watched two dots on the sensor display. The larger one, representing the Ravager, paused in its approach to the base. Then it changed direction, following Eric's signal. It worked, Dr. Carter said with a mixture of relief and fear. It's following him. Frank watched grimly. Now the hard part begins. Eric moved through the jungle as quickly as he could. The portable generator bounced against his back as he navigated the difficult terrain. Behind him, the sensor on his belt showed the Ravager following. It was moving faster than he was. The gap was closing. When he reached a small clearing, Eric stopped to catch his breath. The air was thick and hot, even through his mask. He checked his position on the small map he carried. The geothermal fields were still 5 miles away. Ravager would catch him before he reached them. Eric looked around and spotted a narrow ravine to his left. It would slow the Ravager down, force it to move more carefully. He changed course and headed for it. Back at the base, the team watched Eric's beacon change direction. What is he doing? Frank muttered. That's not toward the geothermal fields. Dr. Carter studied the terrain map. He's leading it through the narrow passes, using the landscape to slow it down. For 2 hours they watched as Eric navigated through the most difficult terrain. Sometimes his beacon would stop moving for several minutes. They held their breath, each time wondering if the Ravager had caught him. Then the dot would move again, continuing its journey south. He's using its size against it, Frank realized. The Ravager is too big to move quickly through those narrow spaces. By late afternoon, Eric had covered nearly 4 miles. The Ravager was less than half a mile behind him now. He was tiring, his pace slowing under the planet's crushing gravity. On T. The command center screens, they saw Eric's beacon stop at the edge of a deep canyon. There was no way across. He was trapped. No, Dr. Carter whispered. He can't be stuck there. The Ravager's signal moved closer. 1/4 mile, 1/8 of a mile. Then Eric's beacon started moving again. Not forward or backward, but down into the canyon. He's climbing down, Frank said in disbelief. Is he crazy? They watched in tense silence as Eric's beacon descended. The Ravager paused at the edge of the canyon, then its signal also began to move downward, following Eric into the depths. He knew it would follow, Dr. Carter said. He's still leading it somewhere. Nighty fell on Terminus. In the darkness, 2 signals moved through the canyon, the human and the monster, locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse, and a specialist who had suddenly become their best hope for survival. What exactly are you proposing, Miller? Give me some basic supplies, a tracking beacon, and the portable generator, Eric said. I'll draw the Ravager away from the base. Lead it somewhere it can't hurt anyone while you repair communications. Without weapons? Frank asked. Eric nodded. Weapons didn't work before. I'll use what I know about it instead. The perimeter alarms grew louder as the Ravager approached the outer boundary of their sensor range. Time was running out. Dawn broke over Terminus, casting long shadows across the landscape. In the command center, Frank and Dr. Carter had not slept. They watched Eric's beacon moving slowly through the canyon, the Ravager always behind him. He's been going for almost 18 hours, Dr. Carter said. No one can keep that pace in this gravity. Frank nodded grimly. He's slowing down. The gap is closing. On the canyon floor, Eric moved carefully over the rocky ground. His legs burned with exhaustion. His lungs worked hard to pull oxygen from the thin air. He could hear the Ravager behind him, its heavy steps echoing off the canyon walls. The portable generator was failing. Its power cells were nearly drained after running all night. Soon, the electrical signal would stop, and Eric would lose his advantage. Ahead, he saw what he had been looking for, steam rising from cracks in the ground. The geothermal field was close. He pushed himself harder, ignoring the pain in his muscles. The canyon opened into a wide basin filled with bubbling mud pots and steam vents. The air was thick with sulfur. Eric navigated carefully around the dangerous spots marking the stable path in his mind. When he reached the center of the field, Eric stopped. He placed the generator on a flat rock and adjusted it to emit its strongest signal. Then he moved to a position behind a large boulder and waited. The Ravager appeared at the edge of the field. It paused, sensing the dangerous terrain. Its yellow eyes scanned the area until it spotted the generator. With careful steps, it began to move forward. "What is he doing?" Frank asked, watching the screens back at base. "Why isn't he running?" Dr. Carter leaned closer to the monitor. "He stopped moving. I think he's making his stand." Eric watched as the Ravager approached the generator. When it was halfway across the field, he picked up a rock and threw it at a nearby mud pot. The rock splashed into the hot mud, drawing the creature's attention. The Ravager turned toward the sound, taking a step away from the path Eric had followed. Its foot broke through the thin crust covering a hot spring. The creature roared as scalding water burned its leg. It pulled back quickly, returning to the safe path. Eric nodded to himself. The Ravager was smart enough to avoid obvious danger. He would need to be smarter. He moved from his hiding place, stepping into view. The Ravager spotted him immediately. Its spine plates rose in threat display. Eric stood his ground, remembering everything he had learned about the creature's behavior. The Ravager charged. Eric waited until the last possible moment, then dove to the side. The creature's momentum carried it forward, directly into a patch of unstable ground. Its weight broke through the crust, trapping one of its legs in hot mud. The beast howled in pain and rage. It pulled free and turned to face Eric again, more cautiously this time. Yellow blood dripped from its injured leg. Eric circled, keeping solid ground beneath his feet. The Ravager followed, limping slightly. Man and beast studied each other, looking for weakness. For nearly an hour, they continued this deadly dance. Eric used his knowledge of the terrain to lead the Ravager into one hazard after another. Each time, the creature suffered some injury but grew more cautious. Eric was tiring. His reactions were getting slower. During one evasion, he stumbled and fell. The Ravager lunged, its jaws snapping inches from Eric's leg as he rolled away. Back at the base, Dr. Carter gasped as Eric's vital signs spiked on the monitor. "He can't keep this up much longer." Frank watched in grim fascination. No human should be able to last this long against that thing. On the geothermal field, Eric faced the Ravager again. The creature was injured but still dangerous. It had learned to avoid the obvious hazards. Eric needed to end this soon, before his strength failed completely. He spotted a large steam vent behind the Ravager. If he could position the creature just right. Eric moved toward the vent, appearing to stumble in exhaustion. The Ravager sensed weakness and charged. 3 days later, Eric awoke in the medical bay. His body was wrapped in bandages. His muscles ached from the extreme effort. Dr. Carter was checking his vital signs when his eyes opened. "Welcome back," she said with a smile. "You've been sleeping for quite a while." Eric tried to sit up but winced in pain. "The Ravager?" "Contained," she assured him. "After you collapsed, Frank led a team to the geothermal field. The creature was trapped exactly where you left it. We've built a reinforced cage around the mud pit. It's still alive but can't escape." Eric nodded and lay back on the bed. "The base? Is everyone safe?" "Thanks to you, yes. We got communications, working again yesterday. The evacuation ship is on its way, but not to take us home. They're bringing more equipment and personnel. Command wants us to continue our research." 2 weeks passed. Eric recovered slowly from his ordeal. The science team studied the trapped Ravager, taking samples and scans from a safe distance. They discovered remarkable things about its biology that would help develop new medicines. Frank found Eric sitting outside the base one evening looking at the jungle. "How are you feeling, Miller?" "Better," Eric said. "Still tired, but better." Frank sat beside him. "Command sent a message for you. They want to give you a medal." Eric shook his head. "I don't need a medal." "Maybe not, but you deserve it." "No one has ever done what you did, faced a Deathworld predator with nothing but your wits and won." The evacuation ship arrived a month after Eric's battle with the Ravager. Instead of taking them home, it brought new equipment, more personnel, and questions. Many questions. Military officers interviewed Eric for days. They wanted to know exactly how he had defeated the Ravager. Scientists examined his recordings and notes. His methods would be used to train future teams on dangerous worlds. Dr. Carter's team made breakthroughs studying the contained Ravager. Its regenerative abilities could help develop treatments for human injuries. Its armor could inspire new protective materials. Even its acid might lead to medical advances. 6 months later, Eric stood on the observation deck of the ship taking him back to Earth. Terminus grew smaller in the distance. The base there had expanded into a proper research station. They had even named it after him, Miller Station. "Will you miss it?" Dr. Carter asked, joining him at the window. "Parts of it," Eric admitted. "Not the gravity or the toxic air. Your methods have been implemented at 3 other Deathworld sites already," she told him. "The survival rate for exploration teams has improved by 60%. Eric nodded but said nothing. He wasn't comfortable with his new fame. He had only done what seemed logical at the time. When they reached Earth, Eric found himself a reluctant hero. News reports told the story again and again. A human fought a Deathworld beast barehanded and won. Military academies asked him to teach. Research facilities offered him jobs. In the end, Eric chose to return to the stars. He joined a new exploration team heading to another challenging world. His experience on Terminus made him valuable. More importantly, he had found his purpose. On alien worlds throughout known space, the story spread and grew. It transformed from a simple tale of survival into something more, a legend about human potential. Other species who had dismissed humans as weak and primitive began to reconsider. The quiet communications specialist who understood rather than confronted became a symbol of humanity's approach to the universe. Not with overwhelming force, but with observation, patience, and intelligence. Years later, when dangerous creatures were discovered on new worlds, the local specialists would often say, "Remember the Miller method. Don't try to overpower it. Understand it." At a training facility for planetary explorers, a plaque displayed Eric's answer when asked how he defeated the Ravager. "I didn't try to be stronger than it. That would have been impossible. I just tried to be smarter. I observed. I learned. I adapted. That's what humans do best." The story of Eric Miller and the Ravager of Terminus became more than just a tale of survival. It became a philosophy for how humanity would face the challenges of a dangerous universe, with open eyes, careful thought, and the courage to stand ground when necessary. A human had fought a Deathworld beast barehanded, and won, and in doing so showed the way forward for all who would follow. Eric waited until the last second, then spun away. The Ravager tried to stop, but slid on the slick ground directly over the steam vent. With a thunderous roar, the vent erupted, blasting the creature with scalding steam. The Ravager shrieked in pain, thrashing wildly. In its panic, it stumbled into a large mud pot sinking up to its chest. Eric watched as the creature struggled to free itself. The more it fought, the deeper it sank. Its roars turned to desperate screeches as the hot mud covered more of its body. Standing at the edge of the mud pot, exhausted and battered, Eric Miller watched the most dangerous predator on Terminus slowly sink into the planet's burning core.